Hello. Um, so getting back to my story about meeting God, there's a couple things after seeing them that I want to add on. I talked about how after the whole situation, I was trying to figure out what had happened to me and looking for people with similar situations. Um, and I'd heard about the ayahuasca plant and the ceremonies that people have, and um, probably that's where I got the idea of the DMT, um, and because it felt like seizures, as I looked into the temporal lobe seizures. Um, but anyway, so yeah, the ayahuasca, some of those when they talk about things, there's certain things they say, like they hear they feel that loving feeling. That was definitely something that was a part of my experience in all of this. The overwhelming feeling of love. Some of the same messages you receive that seem like I don't want to tell people this. I kind of hold back on some things because some things are more personal because God knows what some of these experiences pertain. They're kind of are custom made for you because He knows what you understand. It's interesting. So, um, and when I had taken a particular training, not long after my seizures, my first set of seizures before the God encounter, um, and there was a teacher in yoga, because in yoga they don't talk about these types of things. When this happened to me, I just thought, well, shoot, nobody told me this was gonna happen. I had no idea. Kind of looking back on it, I can see how some of the exercises that I did, especially a lot of the yoga nidra, helps with the spiritual connection. Um, and looking back on it now, it's like, oh wow, I can see how it kind of helped along the way. And then after it happened, I thought, well, does everybody know about this? They just not talk about it, and how many people know, and or do they know that I just found out? And oh, it's just really strange. So I went through a really crazy adjustment period for a while. Many of you probably know. And then after it had happened, my mother wanted to take me to a psychiatrist, and I was all for that because I didn't know what happened to me, and the psychiatrist was more concerned with my mother was a little too controlling. This is what they told me, that I was fine, and that yeah, people have these experiences, and that doesn't make me crazy. And anyway, and so that was at the beginning. Later on, I did go and see another one later, because I started worrying myself, because there wasn't, I was kind of isolated for a while after this happened, in order to um, kind of come into this in my own way. Um, uh, I didn't really know that other people did what had um, had the same abilities that I was experiencing for the first time. Um, so I was kind of isolated, and kind of the way that I looked so nuts kind of was part of getting me into isolation. um, and So what I found interesting when I went to see this one doctor, he just, you go see it. I've been to a psychiatrist since I was about 15. Um, and I've tried a lot of different medications around that time. Back then it was the SSRI, I think they're called, MAOIs. Now, these days, it was interesting because he wanted to give me an anticonvulsant. I guess that's what they're giving out now for what they consider bipolar. But there's, oh man, there's not much I could say about that. But crap. Anyway, so anyway, when I took this training class, talking about seizures, and that has a lot to do with the crown chakra opening. And looking back now, I can kind of see the different stages that I went through. At the time, I didn't realize. I may have known, hey, yeah, I'm working on my third eye, but what it was leading to, I had no idea what it meant. Anyway, and so, and also to touch on the way God was speaking to me, that I could hear His voice. It was like I could hear it in the room, just like you're hearing me through your computer now. And that only lasted about 3 days. And on the first night, I did meet other spirits that in that same period, and the next day, but I didn't hear their voices the same way. I heard it more what I consider telepathically. And when I was 16, I had an experience with telepathy. I tried acid maybe 3 times. I'll say 3. It's either 2 or 3, but I'll say 3. And only around that age, 16 or 17. And it was either the second or third time with my best friend. It was always us together, and we were at another friend's house, laying on the floor next to each other, and having this conversation. And it wasn't until we looked at each other that we realized we weren't talking. That this was going on in our minds, and we knew exactly what the other was saying. And kind of in my mind, because I hadn't been talking, I just was like, did you hear all that? She's like, yeah. It's just really strange. And but anyways, I have, at least I know somebody else out there knows I had that experience because they had it with me. But anyway, so when God was speaking to me, I remembered that, and I was just like, oh yeah, because it's, I don't know, just something I related to being on acid. Like, yeah, that's trippy, and I could see how maybe the brain picks up on the wave. I don't know, whatever. But I didn't think about God in that moment that we had our telepathic experience. So yeah, so the way he spoke to me in the first 3 days, I could hear him out loud. And then I also moved to different types of communication, like I mentioned in the blog that my extremities would buzz, get numb, tingly. And also my nose would kind of felt like the bridge of my nose had started buzzing. I almost felt like somebody punched me in the nose. Just that feeling heavy pressure. And in the first few days, he had taken me driving and would at one point he kind of more so had control of the car. I was just kind of telling me this is where we're going. But things would like fade out, and there would be different ways of learning communication. It gets really simple, and as it gets the more simple it gets, the more abstract it seems, um, because it's more dealing with like nature and coincidence, noticing little things. But when he puts you on that vibration, it's easier to pick up in that frequency feel. But anyway, so one of the things he was doing is like buzzing a certain side of my nose. Um, left was right, right was wrong, and then there would be like this bridge to even it out when we were kind of done with the issue or things were resolved. Um, anyway, but getting back to him moving me around that night, the first night, I talked about raising my hand and changing the iPod with Amy and that story. Right before that, after we went over the clock stuff, he had me, it was after we were talking about the autistic children, and he had sent the shock through my body for a little while. And a few years ago, my life was so different. When I got married and lived in Buffalo, my brother had gotten married not maybe a year before me, and had moved back. He'd been away at school, but moved back near our family and lived with his wife. And he kind of, I think, had this idea that all of us kids, would have a better life after getting through everything, and kind of raise our children around each other. But we kind of had this joke competition about who's going to have the first kid, and because I knew it was going to be spoiled and get a lot of attention, there'd be lots of visiting, and so we just like, you're going to do it, or I'd be like, it's not going to be me, and so my brother and his wife had gotten pregnant and ended up having a miscarriage, and for me, I've seen now that I've gotten older, and some of my friends have gotten married, and tried to have kids. I've seen them kind of go through this. Whether it has to do with taking birth control for so long, or just I understand why things have worked up to the way that they are. Anyhow, but I've seen people have issues with this, but it's just not something that's talked about a lot, so I think it freaks a lot of people out. So she was really upset about losing their child, and at the time they wanted a painting done for their new home. I do paintings, and they asked me to do a large painting for their entry, and they wanted to name the baby Paisley, and at the time, you see, I paint with a lot of circles. But when I started, I would use this Paisley shape, like a sperm or circle with a tail, as a basic shape to make other shapes, to make circles.